Hey folks, thanks for stopping by again. If you caught the last episode, you'll know that I have the carcass pretty much done. Everything's dovetailed together. And what you've missed in between the last episode and this one was a whole lot of sanding. I did a little bit of hand planing just to bring these edges nice and flush. Here where my joints came together, I went ahead and leveled everything up. Again, not perfect, but it's definitely going to be functional here in the old hand tool cabinet. So what I have laid out are my larger hand planes. When I say larger, I mean no joinery planes, no block planes or anything like that. I'm just trying to get a feel for how they're going to fit this space, and it looks like I have a little bit of room to grow, which is great. I'm leaving this back panel that I made a few episodes ago unattached. I'm leaving it just kind of friction fit, and it actually holds in from the bottom and it won't tip forward from the top, so I don't have to worry about it falling out. Gravity will actually work with me. But if I want to, I'll be able to take the cabinet itself down by detaching some screws and replace that back panel if my hand plane collection ever grows, or if I decide that I want to reconfigure things. I think what I'm going to end up doing is permanently attaching my dividers in between these hand planes. And I'm not in love with this back panel, so it may eventually get replaced, but for now, I think it's going to serve its purpose very nicely. So what I have here laid out on the bench are just some walnut strips. These are actually offcuts from some trim, or not trim, but molding work that I had done. And this is the waste that was produced when I cut the molding to size, and they're all roughly the same size, and I just didn't have it in me to throw them away. And I'm really glad that I didn't, because I think these are going to work really great as kind of an accent wood that I can use as a divider for all my hand planes. I can kind of frame everything out and keep it in place, and I think that's going to work really nicely. So the first thing will be to get some measurements and get them attached, or cut to length rather, and then attached in the long sort of vertical strips that'll run up and down in between the hand planes. And then once I've got that done, I'll come back in and do all the horizontal strips that'll sort of frame the hand planes out. And what that'll allow me to do ultimately is, if I decided to move a hand plane up here, there'll be a strip in between the two of them to keep them from bumping into one another. One other thing that I think I'm gonna need to do for these number 4s especially is the back tote bumps into this shelf area. So originally I was gonna make some sort of cup type housing to sort of cradle that, but I really don't think that's gonna be necessary once I get the side strips in. That'll keep it from moving laterally. I think my best option is actually gonna be to come in from the top, put a brace in, and then maybe put a piece in on top of that, to where I'll have to lift the hand plane this and then pull it out. And again, gravity will work with me there, and hopefully that'll work and make a little more sense here in just a minute. So I just measured the inside of the carcass, and it looks like it's about 22 inches. So I'm gonna go with 21 7/8. I don't need a super tight friction fit. These are gonna be, I'm not sure if I'm either gonna nail these or glue them in place, but I'm gonna go with 21 7/8, and we'll see how that looks. So 21 7/8 was definitely the right number. So rather than measuring multiple times, it's a lot nicer to just measure off of a workpiece. So I've got a kind of a story stick here, or a piece that I'll be using over and over and over for these repeatable cuts. And I'll just get the other 4 of these cut. Wondering about this little jig that I'm working on. This is actually my shooting board, and I have it flipped around the other way. This is for squaring up the edges of boards once you've cut them to rough length. I don't think I'm going to need to do that on this. This is, the ends are going to be basically hidden by the corner of the case itself. But I've flipped it around so that I can use it with my Japanese saw, which is a pull style. If I were using my Western style saw, I would actually chuck it up in my leg vise here. It's not the perfect tool for this, but my standard bench hook I set up for a Western style saw and for chisel work, so this works really good as a stand-in. Alright, now we have 5 of them. Let's go see how they fit. Alright, and there you can see I've got my 5 strips laid into place. I think I'm just going to lightly hand sand these, nothing crazy, just to remove the saw marks from them. But I think that's going to work really nicely. I had kicked around the idea of attaching them with brass screws, but as thin as they are, the screw's probably going to look a little bit disproportionate to it. So as I mentioned earlier, I think I'll probably just glue these in place. So what I'll do is take a little bit of painter's tape and stick it to each side of the hand planes, and that will give me just enough clearance to let them come in and out of each one of these strips without being bound up or friction getting in my way. So I'll do that. I'll get these glued up, go get some lunch, and then I'll be back with you here in an hour or two, but for you it'll just be the blink of an eye. And we're back. The strips are all in place. As you can see, the hand planes actually, I think, look really nice the way they're displayed. But one thing that is definitely obvious to me is these big ones are going to be nice and secure. This one is probably, number 62, excuse me, is probably top heavy enough to where it wants to stay put. But any of these shorter ones, I really don't love how tippy they are. In fact, these I can just barely touch. They won't move side to side, but they'll definitely tip out. So I think my instincts were correct. What I'll end up doing is putting a piece across here and then another piece perhaps on top of that. And that'll allow me to hold them in place from the top. So I just need to have a think on how I'm going to do that. I have some wider strips of walnut, so maybe if I cut a couple of braces here, I could get away with just putting one larger brace over the top, and it'll actually look intentional for these 2 number 4s, and then I'll just make a matching piece for the number, 5 1/4, and then I probably go ahead and do it for the 62 as well. If it fell off the wall and hit my concrete floors, I would cry. So I think that's what we're going to do. So let me get some of these cross braces cut to length, and we'll go from there. All right, so I've got everything attached. Off camera, I actually took some trim head nails and pinched the nail head off with a pair of wire cutters, and I was able to drive it in. I had to use my smallest drill bit and do a small pilot hole, but I went ahead and did that just to secure these so I could continue to work on them. These larger ones are glued in place, but it's only been a little over an hour and it's a little cool in my shop today. So I didn't trust that the glue had enough time to set up. So I went ahead and sort of pin nailed, if you will, everything in place. And now I'm just going to come back in and put a small piece over the top of these. And I verified that you can still lift up and pull it out, even if I put something over the top of it. I did it with my hand. So let me find that wider walnut that I have hiding in my wood stack somewhere, and we'll get these things. I'll probably pin and glue those in place as well. And there we have it. These sort of cross brace pieces. I don't know what you'd call them, are all in. And I really like the walnut. I like the contrast with the pine. And you can see here that even though the fit on that one's a little sloppier than I would have liked, it absolutely cannot fall out. But at the same time, I can grab it and just apply a little bit of force from the bottom, and then it goes back in the same way. Just like that. So I think that's gonna hang nicely. And this guy is just about good to go. I'm just gonna do a little bit of sanding to it, just to kind of clean up the walnut a little bit and hopefully make it shine a bit more when I add some finish to it. Probably just gonna do a boiled linseed oil finish. Then I'll get this thing hung up and hopefully put it to good use. All right, here's the corner now that all that junk has been removed out of it. Now, the sad part is all of that junk has exploded all over the rest of my shop, to include clamps and cauls and sharpening supplies and oils and glues, but thankfully we have a nice clean slate to get the cabinet hung by, and I apologize for not filming that process, but there really wasn't a good way to do it without me constantly bumping into the camera and making a mess of things. So let's get this hung up and we'll go from there. All right, and there it is in its final location. I ended up sinking about 8 screws in. This thing is just the perfect width. Let me get you in here and see if you can see it. I had glued another nailer strip in off camera. There really wasn't much to see. It's just a rectangular board, so you can see there I put a couple of screws to keep the bottom from flexing or flopping around. And then up top on that dovetailed nailer that I had put in, it's actually hidden behind the back panel, I sunk an additional 6 screws in, and this thing is sturdy. It doesn't offer to move under all the weight of these hand planes. I was worried about that because it is a lot of metal and a lot of weight, but I was able to go directly into the stud, and this thing is just rock solid. So solid, in fact, that I was able to hang off of it before I put all the hand planes in there. I just had to give it a try, and it's incredible just how strong, between the dovetailed carcass and then that dovetailed and glued nailer pieces in the back, just how strong and rigid this thing is. But I guess that's just about going to do it for this one. I haven't oiled it up yet, but with this pine, really all that's going to do is add just a slight yellow to it. So I will probably do that. Maybe I'll show that in a future video, but I think that's going to be it for this one. I'm super happy with it. I think it really sort of neatens the space up over here. I'll probably end up putting my sharpening station there where you see. This is the one of 2 times that I used power tools during this build. I did use my drill and impact driver to hang the thing, and I used my shop vac to clean out some of the cobwebs and some of the dust that had accumulated over here. But I'll probably end up putting my sharpening station, as I was saying, over here. And just looking at the space, I think I can put a lot of my small clamp storage underneath where I have this old work tray that used to sit beside my bench. I can move it and my smaller shop vac out of there and maybe do like a clamp rack that runs at least the width of the cabinet itself. But there it is, finally finished. Thanks for sticking with me if you have on this one. I apologize for the long delay between this and the last video. I had a stool to make for my daughter, and I would invite you to check out that playlist if you like what I do here. But again, thanks for stopping by. This was definitely an inspiring and an eye-opening project for me, and I hope it was for you. I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes along the way, but as you can see, those dovetails turned out fine. The rabbeted shelf turned out just fine, and even though it's certainly not what I would call perfection, it's better than I was yesterday, and hopefully not as good as I will be tomorrow. So take care. If you enjoy what you see here, maybe consider subscribing, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.